Excuse me. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Mike Davila. I'll be with you tonight as we talk through this month's webinar topic, which is college-bound student resumes. We're going to pause here just a minute and let people come into the webinar. I know we do have probably 11 or 12 families signed up for this evening. So we're going to let everyone kind of get into the room here and get settled before we get started. It could be that everyone's out there covering their plants and dripping their faucets, etc. Okay, folks are coming in. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome in, everyone. I was just mentioning that a lot of folks are registered for this, and people are probably also out covering plants and getting ready for the crazy weather. So I appreciate you guys making time for the presentation tonight. We're going to have a really pretty quick talk. Tonight, we'll be talking about college-bound student resumes. My name is Mike Davila. I'm one of the partners of College Inroads. Each month, we put on a little webinar talking about some of the topics that kind of come up throughout the process of planning for college. And tonight's is about the resume. If you've been with us for a while, your student may have already begun the process of working on their resume. If you just joined in here recently, this may be brand new material. So we'll just kind of pretend that no one's seen this, and we'll proceed from that point. We're recording tonight's webinar. If you ever want to go back and listen to any of our previous webinars, you can go into your students' College Inroads portal, and under the Files section, there is a monthly webinar section in there, and it has links to all of the YouTube content that we put up. So anyway, feel free to avail yourself of that if you'd like, but sit back, relax. We're going to have a few slides here on the college-bound student resume. Mom, Dad, I don't know about you guys, but I had no student resume when I applied to college, when the dinosaurs roamed the earth many, many moons ago. So this, for a lot of parents, tends to be kind of like, what is this all about? Why are we even working on this? We're not trying to get a job per se. We're trying to get into college.
Yes,
And
very helpful.
there are some
All right.
good reasons that we'll go through why it's helpful to have this. So if I could have everyone mute, that would be fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and mute folks here in the waiting room. Okay, great. So anyhow, let's, without further ado, let me go ahead and start with the slides. Oops, we have more people coming. My apologies. Let me help them get in. Okay, great. All right, welcome in, everyone. Okay, so resumes. We'll kind of begin here. What's our agenda for tonight? How to even approach starting a student resume? If you're really early in the process, like a freshman or sophomore, this may be something that's just starting to be created. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Why bother with this? How many colleges actually really look at this sort of thing? Is this a big deal? What goes into an academic resume, and what specifically is different about an academic resume than a job resume, which we as parents are pretty familiar with. Do all the colleges look at them, or do they require them? Well, that'll be an interesting question to look at. What does a good resume look like? And then some common questions. So those are all the areas that we're going to jump into this evening. One of the other features of our webinars series that we run is that, we're going to cover this topic, but you may have other questions beyond the scope of resumes, which is completely great. At the end, you'll certainly have a chance to ask any and all questions on other parts of the process as well. So, okay, so beginning with introspection, I always like this slide because what I find, especially for younger students, many of them haven't really thought about some of these questions very deeply. They may know them, but they may never have been asked, hey, what are your true interests and passions? So if you're a freshman or a sophomore, these are the years to start really thinking about, oh, yeah, I have this, kind of interest in chess that I have never really done much with. Okay, great. It's now time to explore and see what's available. And it's surprising to me sometimes at big high schools with many clubs and activities, I'll ask the student, have you ever really looked at all the things that are available at your high school? And many times I hear, no, I don't know what all is here. I just, see the bulletin boards and things like that at school. So actually helping your student look at some of those opportunities or beyond is great to help develop their true interest and passion. Oftentimes students have to start beginning to ask, hey, what's my major going to be? Well, those of us who are applying to more and more selective schools, it's very common now to see colleges doing this thing called fit to major, which means that your resume, your list of activities, somewhat guides toward that future major. I was just speaking with a student earlier today, and he wants to do biochemistry. And he was saying, yeah, I've been talking to my folks about possibly doing some shadowing with a family friend who has work in a lab. Great. We talked about maybe, trying to get an opportunity at UT. There is also a huge section of summer enrichment programs, by the way, in your students' files section of the College Inroads website, which helps them source some things that they could be doing over the summers. So anyway, all of that's really great. How can I develop knowledge and experience in the area or the areas that I'm really looking for? And what comes to my mind here, and many of us did not have this opportunity at all when we were in high school. There are things called Coursera, edX, various websites that host essentially really widely disseminated college classes, certification programs, some of which cost a little bit of money, some which are completely free, hosted and put on by like MIT. So yeah, if you have an interest in biochemistry, that's a great place to go to the edX website and see, hey, could I take an extra little course in the area that I'm really interested in? So that's really great to take advantage of. What does the college really truly want to know about me? Well, that's very interesting because to me, that final bullet point says it all. Think about the character traits. At the bottom of the resume format that we have at College Inroads, we invite the student to start really thinking about those character traits. We kind of hit on that in the career meeting. But in the resume meeting, which kind of comes right after that, they're invited to start thinking about, yeah, I'm competitive, or I'm really, really interested in certain areas and I'd like to do research, whatever. Those are the things that the colleges really love to know about because that's the stuff they can't get from data. Okay. They're just pure and simple. So we try to feed that information to the colleges, both through the essays and through this resume. Okay. All right. So why, it begs the question, why bother developing a resume? Well, you could in fact apply to college without a resume, in some cases for sure. There are some more, I would say just non-competitive or non-selective schools that you could just jump on the Common App or get on Apply Texas, put in your information and it all done, no worries. But what we've found is that many of our students are not that kind of category of student. They're applying to really competitive schools, of which, like for example, I toured University of Chicago a few years back, and we had a chance as consultants to sit in the boardroom where they actually make the admissions decisions. They handed out files that had been sanitized of information that would identify anybody, but it was the student records. And yeah, some of these students had 5-page resumes. It was pretty darned amazing. So it runs the gamut in terms of 0 resume to 5-page resumes and things of that nature. So depends on you. What schools are I applying to? If I'm looking to apply to a school like UT, they do allow students to upload a fully formed student resume into their college portal, not into the app per se. But once a student applies to a school like UT, they'll open up a portal for that student's admissions decision and document, sometimes transcript information, all that kind of stuff. And there we can upload a resume. Also, within the application, there is, in some cases, the ability to upload a resume right there. But beyond that, developing a resume, I think, and looking at it earlier in the process helps provide focus. You can sort of step back a little bit and go, okay, where am I a little bit weak? Where are my strengths? How do I position those strengths so that my reader really gets the gist of who I am? So I think that it's a really valuable exercise to go through just for that purpose alone. It also helps us on the college inroad side help pair with college choices. So it's really helpful for us as we get to know your student, what's going on for them and what kinds of things are they're spending their time in, because most of our students are really busy these days. Resumes also can help with teacher recommendations. Some high schools do brag sheets. That's the way for a teacher to kind of get to know your student ahead of time, but many schools don't. Like Lake Travis High School doesn't do brag sheets. So this resume can be used typically in the second semester of junior year or over the summer for those teachers to write really nice recommendations for your students. They also help with in-person interviews. During COVID, that kind of went away, obviously, and everyone was interviewing online. But in this new day and age, a lot of colleges that used to do interviews are now kind of getting away from them, but there are still opportunities to do that. So having a resume in hand in an in-person interview is helpful. And again, I mean, the bottom line for us is that it helps us quickly and easily fill out the college application once your student gets into that part of the process. So those are all the reasons on why to actually develop a resume for the student. So what are the college's policies on resumes? So you can, again, kind of all over the board, for Cornell, U Rochester, Michigan, Madison, places like that. Yep, these are required things to put into the application. UT Plan 2, yep, you got to have it. There are some schools that do not want to see a resume, period, end of story. And we've listed a few of those here. And then other places like UT and MIT, Columbia, Florida State, yep, those are encouraged. So once we get into the application process, we can dig into that more fully for each school, but we have everyone do one regardless. Okay. Another question that I get sometimes from parents or students is, hey, do I need to have every heading in your example resume completed? And the answer is no. We, years ago decided, hey, here are 6, 7, 8 different categories of things that students typically have in their back pocket: extracurriculars, leadership, summer activities, things like that. But feel free to play with these. I've plenty of times deleted many of them or focused certain areas of the resume and tweaked it specifically for a student. I can think of a time this year where I have a student who's an equestrian, where we just talked about equestrian, period, end of story. That was an entire heading because of all the things that kind of come from equestrian for that student. So the bottom line here is I want you guys to have freedom to be able to modify this and not feel constrained by these headings. The other thing to know related to this is on the Common App, there is no categories. There are none. So they give you only 10 areas that you can comment on, or 10 blanks, so to speak. So it could be leadership, education, it could be talent. It's up to you to fill in those as you see fit. So we just try to encapsulate all of the different areas on our template, which I'll show you in a minute. Okay. Can you ad lib this? Yes, absolutely. And then what does an example resume look like? Well, guess what? It does not look like this. I've seen people get really tweaked about how it looks. I personally don't care how it looks as long as it's neat and organized. It doesn't have to have colors and all sorts of fancy bells and whistles. It has to have good information. That's much, much more important. So yeah, am I being facetious with My Little Pony showing up here on the resume example? Yes, I am, of course. But I put this up there to make that particular point. It's the quality of the information that's being presented, not the format really that most people care about on the inside of this. So here's that. Let me stop that slideshow, and I'm going to come over to this resume. So hopefully you guys are seeing the resume format. Okay, Emery's giving me the thumbs up. Great. So here is the College Inroads example student resume for you to look at. This is located in the student's files. It's also embedded within the resume template that we have for your students. So really basic. Up here at the top, we've got the name, rank, serial number. What are we doing in high school, for example? here's an example statement about the major and career goals. I'm going to tell you guys, this is secret sauce. This is really helpful for your resume reviewer to get that kind of information right up front. It contextualizes the rest of the resume. I don't see a lot of my peers doing this kind of work with resume, but we put it in there just for the express purpose to give the students an opportunity to have like a cover letter, so to speak. You can see that this particular student had some leadership in their background, some extracurriculars. By the way, one thing that you'll sometimes see are questions about, like, for example, hey, I'm on the varsity baseball team captain. Do I need to be putting that down underneath, my extracurricular activities? Generally, the answer is no. But in this case, the student had a whole bunch of other activity stuff with baseball, so he just decided to go ahead and add it in both places. But a lot of times you don't want to see a lot of duplication of effort between these different sections. Community service, you can see some things there. Work experience, internships. Now, I'm going to point one thing out here with work experience. Colleges love to see students doing work, period, end of story. It speaks to a lot of things like responsibility. Sometimes the students can talk a little bit about, how they've spent their money, things of that nature. What I've highlighted here is common to the Common App. For example, if we were going to put this on the Common App, we would need to supply the information on the hours per week and the weeks per year that the student actually participated in the activity. So sometimes I'll see people just strip that right on off, and we're always having to add it back on. So this is one area you can get ahead of that curve, especially for community service, because a lot of our students are doing tons of community service hours, and list that. Now, I'm going to pause here and say the one thing that we do have a meeting on this right up front in the engagement, but oftentimes a year into it, this thing has changed. It's morphed. It needs to be updated. It needs to be re-looked at, maybe even reprioritized. So it is a living and breathing document. My goal up front is to have something that's workable and really nice, but yep, by the second semester of junior year, this needs to be coming into its final format so that by the end of that second semester, this thing is really nice, very complete, etc. So I'm like in February, a lot of times with my students who are 26 grads, we're starting to recycle going back to this document to make sure we're not missing things. So I just want to let you guys know as parents that if you see a document that isn't fully formed yet, that's pretty normal. But toward the end of that process of junior year, it needs to be, in better shape than when it began. So one other thing here, I'm going to point out this area that's highlighted. We highlighted it on purpose because sometimes students miss this, but this is where those character traits, hey, what is your biggest regret in terms of your high school experience? If you could have a do-over, what would you do? Things like that. That's not going to show up. We're not going to give that to the college. We need that internally. So if you're helping your student get through this document, absolutely go, finish this off because it's going to help in the whole process for sure. So thanks in advance for that. Okay, so that's enough of that. Let me go back over to the presentation here. Okay, great. All right, so now we're on to the resume example. That I'm just going to tell you, it's in the file section of your Inroads portal. Please do use this format. It's very good. We base this roughly on the UT expanded resume format that they provided. So it's well accepted across the board at many schools. Please don't try to cut and paste into that document from something else, like from Microsoft Word specifically, because it will make all the formatting really wonky. So just try to, if you've got another document started, great, just maybe re-enter the data in there just to keep everything nice and easy on the eyes. And also, every once in a while, we'll have people upload an external file into the files section to provide the data. Please don't do that. We already have set up a resume in the general folder that's already pre-shared with the educational consultant and your student. So just use that iteration of that document. So common questions and concerns from the resume standpoint. Hey, I don't have a lot to put on my resume. Is that okay? And yeah, I have that with a student this year. There's just not a whole lot going on there. And that is okay as long as I would say we're not trying to get into Harvard or Yale or Princeton, Duke, those kinds of places or hyper competitive schools like UT, because we just need to know that many of the people who are applying to those schools are self-selecting with lots of activities, lots of high scores and things like that. Um, what if I don't have something to put into each category or subheading? That's completely fine. That's actually pretty normal. I don't want anyone to freak out about that and say, oh my gosh, I've got to now fill up this subcategory like summer activities with a bunch of stuff. No, that's not the point. Should I include my GPA or SAT or ACT scores? Okay, that's a great question. The first part of that, the GPA, yep, the GPA should definitely be on there. I prefer to see both a weighted and an unweighted GPA. That's part of the reason why we kind of keep after people to give us the students' most up-to-date transcript. Thank you. Lost my mind there for a second. So that's important for us to see. But the SAT, ACT scores are optional on the resume. Most of our students will go ahead and put them in there, but if we're not great test takers, that's fine. Okay, there's still tons and tons of schools that are test optional, but we don't want to let that cat out of the bag if we're trying to kind of put away those scores out of visibility on the resume. And should we have the major and career goals section in there? Every once in a while, someone will try to just delete that. And the answer is no, definitely put that in there. Even if you're undeclared or undecided on a major, it's a great way to express how you've prepared yourself for a college experience. All right. And then some more questions. Should it be more than one page? Sure, it can be. It doesn't. Oftentimes, I will say many of our students do have multi-page resumes, and sometimes that gives parents heartburn because we're used to seeing really truncated, short, dynamic resumes that are one page. But that's not a student resume. How far back in time do we go? That's another great question. And for this one, I'm going to say it depends. 98% of the time, what we really want to see is freshman year to present day. Okay, freshman year to present day. But there are some times where, hey, I'm a violinist. I started this in sixth grade. Okay, great. You can go ahead and indicate 6 through 12 or 6 through 11 on the resume itself. You can talk about those things if they're still ongoing. How do you guys at Inroads want us to order all this stuff? Should it be chronological, order of importance, fit to major? What's the story here? Well, it can be any of these, but generally speaking, for really competitive schools, what we want to do is hit those activities that are directly related to the major right up front. So if for whatever reason the resume reader has a 1,000 of these things to go through in a day and they're just brushing through them real fast, I want all of that stuff related to the major up front in the upper part of that resume, not buried in the third page. Can I get help from my parents in setting up on my resume? Yeah, for sure. This can be a group project. Parents, you guys are good. You've seen the students and what they've done. But the one thing I want to kind of feed into your mind here is that think accomplishments, think what have I learned from these activities? What have I personally gained in terms of the student in doing Boy Scouts or doing Boys State or doing whatever it may be, Model UN? That's the kind of stuff that's really impactful for the admissions people. Again, seeing into kind of the soul of the student. It's not, yes, achievements for sure. We're a level 12 gymnast. Great. But what did you get out of that? Why is that important to you? Why did you continue when you had an injury? All that kind of stuff. Perfect. Okay. Can I get help from AI in setting up my resume? Yep, I actually had a student this past year do a really great job with AI and his resume. And what it did was basically said, okay, like let's say baseball team, that AI went ahead and for the bullet points, set those up very nicely with the character traits that the student gained from it. Perfect. Now, when we do the essay talk, this will go right off the table. No, AI has got no place in setting up an essay because it's a super slippery slope. And colleges really don't care about the resume in terms of who generated it, but they absolutely do care about the essays. So just keep that in mind. And again, last point, do I really need to have the hours per week and weeks per year that I did in activity? And the answer is, of course, yes. Okay. So I blew through a lot of really good information really, really quick. Questions? Any questions on the resume? Okay. All right. So we'll expand now this to say, are there any questions regarding any part of our process? Any of the stuff that's upcoming? Any concerns that you're seeing, in the world of higher ed, anything like that? All right. So that said, action items for juniors, people who are now close to being rising seniors, touch up that resume. Think about teacher recommendations. We don't need the commitments, or we don't need them to write this right now. We just need to be strategizing, hey, who are going to be my best recommenders? Okay. Work toward completion of college research. I know some of us have just joined the process and don't sweat this, but if you joined us a year ago, you've probably gotten to the point now where you have a college list and you're starting to do the research. Remember, we really want to be down to like 8 to 10 schools kind of by the end of this last semester of junior year. I'm going to make a note here on demonstrated interest in colleges. The student I was working with this afternoon, I was saying, hey, we're digging in to look at WashU. And WashU has a rep that covers Austin specifically. Okay, this is the person that student can ask, hey, I looked at biochemistry as the major, looks great, but I don't see any of the advanced electives on your website. Can you help me find those? Great question to be asking your admissions rep that's showing early in the process that you're researching and interested in the school. There are virtual information sessions, in-person visits, and things like that. Definitely be thinking about setting some time aside for that. Many of our students are doing the March 8th SAT, and that's coming up. There's an April ACT, so there's a lot of people, actually there's February as well. February and April ACT that's coming up. Looking at college visits. And then if you feel like, hey, I'm lost here, I'm falling behind, or we've been kind of quiet here on the student side for a minute, yeah, always reach out to us. We can fill in the gaps, answer questions, meet with your student if we need to do that sort of thing, if we feel like things are falling behind. So, okay, so that said, any more questions? Any other things that kind of popped in? Okay, so I've got a question here regarding summer internships. There are a lot of expenses options out there. What they charge 3,000 and up. Are those reputable experiences like Delta Institute? Yeah, some of them are really great. And what I would say is this in general, the ones that I tend to gravitate toward are ones that are actually hosted by the school, not necessarily just put on at the school, but are actually hosted by Cornell or whoever, and it's taught by faculty from that university itself. Those I think are probably the more valuable ones. There are others out there that are kind of pay to play types of opportunities. That's still going to be helpful for the student. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with those, but just know that the ones that at least I gravitate toward, and I think the admissions people also gravitate toward, are the ones that are housed at the universities and hosted by the universities themselves. All that to say, if your student ends up with a good experience, meaning they learn more about themselves and more about the world around them, then it's been a success. The reason why I say that is then they can start to write about that on the college essays later in the process. So that would just be my input there. And that's a great question. Let's see here. Okay, I think that's the only one pertinent to the group. Any other things, Anne-Marie, you can think of? This is Anne-Marie, my business partner.
Hey guys. No, I mean, the only thing that I would say is remember we have the essay clinic coming up on March 1st if you're a junior, but that's kind of that's the only big thing we have coming up, I think.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'm going to have my friend Peter Guzman, who's a former admissions rep at Rice University. He's going to be helping us with that and talking about essays, and that's March 1st. So, all right, gang, going once, going twice. Thank you guys. Thanks for being here, and hope you have a great night. Stay warm and drip those faucets and be safe. Take care.